Hello and welcome back. We're continuing our work on our color theory acrylic painting. Today we're working on lesson 3.07, and this is really day one of painting our backgrounds. The biggest thing for today that we talked about was the idea that we want to create gradients. Now, there are two different things when we talk about value and value scale. Value is the light and darkness of what is seen. So we're going to be painting values. Now, that being said, when people talk about value scales, they typically think of what you see on the right here, the organized value where it's the different individual colors, they're separated by a line. We don't really want that for our paintings. We really want a gradient scale. And this is a continuation of blending from one tone to the next. They're not really separated like the hard line that you see in these value scales. So that's what we're attempting to do today. We want to have a nice transition from dark to light as we paint. We're going to, do this. It's going to add shading and some highlights to our project, which is going to be kind of cool. But this is really the background focus. And again, focused on that idea of Peter Max as our inspiration with these rays. So we're going to start painting in our rays from yesterday that we drew, or from the previous session. And it says here on our screen, we're going to use paint. We're going to start with our lighter color, and then we're going to paint our rays, filling almost the whole thing with the lighter color, and then we're going to go use our darker color, start at the other side of the ray, and work into that lighter color, blending it as you go. This will help you create a really nice transition and gradient of color. So I'm going to switch over to the camera, and here you can see this is what I've done in my live session. And so I started and I painted my ray with white, and then I added my blue down here, and I painted the blue into that white, and I created these really nice gradients. And then I have a ground that we'll talk about as well and what to do there. Okay. Now for this one, I wanted to do something a little different. And so I'm going to use a different color scheme. I'm still going to use white as my lightest color, but I'm also going to do a warm color palette for this one. So I'm going to put some white on my palette over here, there, and just be careful because I know I like to use a lot of white when I paint, and we only have that small tube, so we want to make sure we're not using too much. So I'm going to use some yellow on my paint palette, and because I want to do a warm color palette, I'm going to go with yellow and red. The yellow and red's going to mix and make an orange. I could always add some orange and yellow if I wanted it to be a little bit lighter overall, but I am going to use some red here, I think, too. Okay, so lighter color first. I'm going to start with, for the sake of time, I'm going to actually get a different brush here. A little bit bigger of a brush. The brush that came in our paint set is a little smaller. It certainly will work perfectly fine for this. I just want to go a little faster in this demonstration. So I have a brush here, and I'm going to start with my lighter color. So I'm going to load my brush with my white. Okay, and then I'm going to pick, and we're going to do alternating rays. So I'm going to pick this ray here, and I'm going to start, and I'm going to paint the white on the outside edge. And I'm being careful when I get to the line that I'm painting up to the line, but not over the line. And it's hard to see because I'm painting, I know, white on a white canvas, but that's okay. And I'm going to paint that white. I can see it in person, and it's hard to see on camera, but it actually is like glossy. So when it's wet, so I can kind of see where that paint is a little easier than you guys can see it there on the camera. I'm going to paint down in towards the middle. And then what I'm going to do, because I'm using two colors, it's a little more complicated, I'm going to start with my yellow, and I'm going to come down away from where I was, so we'll start here, and I'm going to paint that yellow up in towards that white. And as I paint, that yellow's mixing with the white that's already on the canvas, and I'm getting a nice gradient from dark to light. Okay, now I am going to take and kind of wipe off some of the paint that's on my brush, not all of it. And then I'm going to go to my red. And I'm going to start here where my crab is. And I'm going to paint that dark red down in towards the bottom of this ray. And then I'm going to paint up the edge. And when I get into that yellow, it's going to start to mix. Get this edge. And I'm painting right over top of my drawing at this point. Like this. And then I'm going to paint that red. Just keep pulling that red. And notice that I'm painting in the directions of the rays. All the way out. So now I have a really interesting from dark to light gradient of color in that piece of artwork. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next ray. I'm going to wash my brush out. And I'm going to do the same thing. Start with my white. I'm skipping that next one. I'm going to put white here. All the way up at the edge. And sorry, I have to keep lifting it up so I can see that white glossy effect on the canvas there so I can see where I'm actually painting. I'm going to paint that white down into the shape all the way. Okay, so I'm about halfway there. I'll start, I didn't wash out my brush. I'm going to grab some of that yellow. Actually, I grabbed some red too. So try to keep that clean. And then we're going to paint that yellow. Start about halfway. And I'm going to paint that yellow into that white. Get that yellow right up to the edge. And while that white is still wet, to blend out that color. We get light values then. There. Okay, let's add a little bit more yellow down here to keep this wet. To the edge. And then I'm going to switch. I'm going to grab my red. I'm going to start down here. I'm going to paint up to the edge neatly. Okay, and then I'm going to take that red, kind of fill in, and paint that red into that yellow. Blending that color with the yellow that exists. If your paint starts to feel like it's sticking, it's like your brush is sticking, it's not gliding, you can add a little tiny bit of water to your brush. That will help that paint start to glide a little bit. If you add too much, it'll act like an eraser and pull that paint off. So you want to just be careful you don't add too much. And it thins it, makes it more transparent. Right. So you can kind of see, again, from my dark red, oranges, yellows, and whites. I mean, that nice gradient colors thing happening. I have to fix this edge a little bit, I think. And I'm always painting with the direction of the ray. I'm not ever painting across it. All right, I'm going to rinse out my brush again, and we're going to keep doing this process until we finish all of the rays. Okay, so I have finished the rays in the background, and now I've got to figure out what I want to do with this bottom. So I think what I want to do down here is I want to keep my same kind of warm color palette. Being that this is going to be light and dark, and this is dark, I kind of want this to be darker. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find maybe like the crimson red, or maybe even the magenta is super dark. I think we'll go with the magenta. And I'm going to do the same process at the bottom, where I start light at the bottom and I go dark. And I'm going to put it on this new really dark magenta. Let's see. Magenta sometimes can be pink. I don't want it to be pink. Let's see. This definitely does not look like pink magenta. So we'll see how this goes. So same process as before, it's just a bigger, larger section. If you don't have a bottom section, then you would just, continue your rays all the way around. So I'm going to flip this upside down here. I'm going to start with my white, and I'm going to paint this more horizontal. This is a ground, so having it horizontal versus the rays were like kind of diagonal out from that center point is okay, because as a horizontal, it's grounding. It's creating some stability in the composition. So I'm going to kind of go left and right in this section versus a horizontal or an up and down or a diagonal. Okay, so I've got my white kind of laid in. I'm not going to use, I picked up some blue from somewhere. That's okay. So I got that white laid in with a little bit of yellow and a little bit of blue specks. And then I'm going to kind of transition to another color. So let's say I'm going to put in some yellow here too. Okay, so I'm just going to put in some yellow back and forth here. And I got on my desk this. And I had a little bit of that red left over, so I picked some of that up too. But I'm doing horizontal strokes here. And what do I need? I used up all my yellow, used up all my red. I think I'm going to put a little more yellow on my thing. And I think before I get to that dark red, I think I'm going to get a little more of that scarlet red on my project yet. Okay, so while this is still wet, I have to work kind of quickly to blend this in because I don't want that leading edge. We've talked about that wet leading edge to disappear. So I have to kind of work. I'm going to put some yellow back in here, down here. Okay. If it starts to feel like your brush is pulling, put a little bit of water on your brush, and that'll help glide it across the surface. Okay. I do feel like this yellow needs to go a little bit further down into that white there. Whoops. And I did add a little more water right there when I was talking to because it was just starting to pull. And I haven't really cleaned off my brush, so some of those reds are coming down into this bottom section too, and that's okay. I think it looks good. As long as you're happy with the way it's looking and you have some kind of fun gradient happening, I think you're in good shape there. Okay, so I think that bottom looks pretty good. I need to work on this top part, and I did use up all my scarlet red again. So, whoops, now I'm gonna have plenty there. I put way too much on my palette. That's okay. Because I have quite a bit of yellow on my brush, I am gonna rinse out my brush and dry it off a little bit. And then I'm gonna go back into that scarlet, put some of that on that leading edge to keep that wet. Trying not to take it down too far because then I'll have to move it. Right there's an issue, but I'll fix it here in a second. Okay, and I don't want to go too far with that red. I want to get this dark red in here. So I'm going to switch things around a little bit because I want to be able to paint a nice clean line. It is a little more pink than I was anticipating, but that's okay. I think it's going to be cool. When we're talking about Peter Max's work, right, and this like bright, bold pops of color that he uses, I don't think we can make a mistake here. So I'm getting a nice, clean, dark edge line to get me started. Nice and straight if I can. And then I'm just going to bring that down into that scarlet. A little bit both on my brush. And again, this is going left to right. I'm not trying to follow a diagonal. I'm grounding that painting. Just go back and forth in those to blend and get that nice gradient happening. I do have this weird thing happening here with my scarlet and my yellow that I messed up a little bit. So I'm going to start by putting some yellow on my brush and a little bit of that scarlet and just come right over that line where that kind of was dark. Just brush that out left and right. Wow, I'm really happy with that. I think that looks really great. Let's flip it and take a look. This is about half of our background painted. We'll do the next half in our next session. We do the opposite rays, but I'm really pleased with how that looks at this point. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and make sure we take a good quality picture of this for our progress pictures for our progress sketchbook, and then we'll get back together the next time and we'll continue these other sections. And then we'll go back in and draw in our shapes and continue this painting process. If you have any questions or concerns about day one painting the background, please reach out and let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the process.